right, here we go. This was fall of 1994. My dear friends, writing these letters makes me happy, but even though we bought this word processor a few months ago and I've been wanting to show it off, I couldn't get the words to come out of it. After various feeble starts, it seemed a good idea to put my mind and the machine to some other use, and I began to transcribe the first letter that I had written from my ungraceful and off-putting handwriting. When I had first written in early 1987, I was coming out of many years of total family involvement, 3 children born within 25 months, during which I had scarcely thought of friends from my traveling days, and my object in writing was to tell them briefly and provocatively where I was, body and mind, in the hope that they would contact me. I wrote that I was settled in southeast Fresno with a wife and children, and that I was happy in the root sense of the word, content with what happened. I thought they would want to get in touch with someone happy, but my expectations were wildly exaggerated because no one was moving to respond. Until now, I just dialogue with myself. I had not meant to provoke myself, but I could hardly wait to finish copying that first letter so I could answer the questions raised. What is happy? Here's number 9 of Paul Rep's 101 Zen stories. It's called The Moon Cannot Be Stolen. Ryokan, a Zen master, lived the simplest kind of life in a little hut at the foot of a mountain. One evening, a thief visited the hut only to discover there was nothing in it to steal. Ryokan returned and caught him and said, "You may have come a long way to visit me," he told the prowler, "and you should not return empty-handed. Take my clothes as a gift." The thief was bewildered. He took the clothes and slunk away. Ryokan sat naked watching the moon. "Poor fellow," he mused. "I wished I could give him this beautiful moon." We'll come back to reconsider Ryokan's happiness later. Last summer, we were talking over supper about the past school year, and I asked Amy, 14 years old, if there had been any repercussions from her run-in with the English teacher who had called me in for a conference in the last week of school because, she said, Amy had called her a liar. At the conference, both parties agreed that the teacher had told the class at the first of the year that she had not cared for them, but had come to enjoy them a lot. But then Amy commented to friends that it sounded patronizing. The teacher heard that, was offended, and demanded an explanation. At this point, the stories differ a little bit. Amy said she had been making a joke and told the teacher to forgive it as she had been lying in an attempt at sarcasm. The teacher said Amy had called her a liar, and the proof was that just as she, the teacher, was no liar, no right-thinking person would claim themselves a liar. I jumped in then, apologizing profusely, to say that the problem lay with me, as I had told Amy and her brother many times that I'm a liar. I tell them so because I want them to use their senses to judge the world and not accept anything simply because it's stated by authority. I tell them that everyone lies, even their dear loving father, and to be particularly wary when someone says, "I don't lie," because that is surely a lie. The teacher looked confused. I don't know if she understood that I had called her a liar. She said she would drop the matter if Amy would write an apology, and so Amy did. She wrote that she was sorry the teacher thought she had been called a liar, and in answer to my question about repercussions, Amy said the term had finished in reserved tolerance, her grade had not been lowered, and it was all over. At this point, I said that claiming what many people could not understand, such as being a liar or black or homosexual, made my life happy, but that I tried to select my audience to avoid the sort of person who will call a conference at the sound of a word. The children, accustomed to my claim of liar, clamored for details about black and homosexual. So I explained that when I was younger, a concept like race or sexuality would enter my head like a wrestler and tangle my mind, strangling thought until I would be exhausted and want to tap out, just to quit being nagged. But I couldn't until actually tapping out occurred to me. Just concede, it's that simple. Co-opt the nagging idea and the mental dialogue becomes pointless and ceases? Yeah. I'm black and I'm gay, and it's out of my mind. I thought at the dinner table, as when I had written this before in a letter, that there would be further discussion. But no. The kids left the table with Amy saying, "Cool, I can hardly wait to get to school and tell my friends my dad says he's homosexual." And that was the end of it. It's not what I expected, but I was happy with that. Accepting happiness wherever or wherever it's found began for me in my early 20s. I've told in prior letters that the meaning dropped out of reality for me in late 1969, and then within a year I had abandoned the Peace Corps, my plans for the future, and Tina. I continued to jettison traits and ideals, simplifying life to deal with uncertainty, and by the first month of 1971, I had given away all that I owned that wouldn't fit in a bedroll, and I set off for the Amazon. The first leg of the journey was an hours-long flight in an old military cargo plane from the capital of Colombia to Colombia's stake on the fabled river, the village of Leticia. There was a young woman aboard, traveling with two men, seeming rich college kids out for adventures straight out of Abercrombie and Fitch. I'd been daydreaming at the porthole, but when the glass fogged up, I idly contemplated their accoutrements. Backpacks that were like the state-of-the-art featured in Playboy and Esquire layouts of what the well-equipped trekker carries, each stuffed and festooned with doodads, and I shifted my gaze to the people, togged from their feet up in clothes as precious as their packs. I was comparing my own gear, smiling to think that I was not envious, but rather pitying them the weight they were carrying, when the woman caught my eye and smiled. My lips flew into the wolf's grin that I had turned on every remotely interested girl in the last 15 years, trying to make something happen. But then, happy at the thought of my new freedom, I turned to my companions, and I didn't think of her again. I had given up career plans, love, life goals, material goods, patriotic duty, greed, and now lust. I was traveling in more than time and space. In the late afternoon, the plane landed on a red clay runway scraped out of the jungle a couple of miles back from the river port, and we walked the puddled road to town. Leticia is so small it only took minutes to find out there are no boats going downriver, but that there is more boat traffic at the Brazilian port of Tabatinga across the river. We climb into a dugout log with an outboard motor that ferries the river, and just like that, we're on the Amazon. The Amazon. It made me tingle. The houses are all on stilts 20 feet above the water, but they say the rainy season is beginning, and though the river is already more than a mile across, it will soon rise to the level of the houses. In Tabatinga, we find there is a riverboat like the African Queen departing downriver in the morning. We book passage and we find shelter for the night. We're 6 days on the boat, but the time is like the river, difficult to parse. So I'll tell you about one day that could have been any day. When we woke, it was full dark, but something was thumping rhythmically against the hull. Nobody else seemed disturbed, and I might have rolled back into my thin sleeping bag, but the filthy deck was hard and the wind was chill, so I pulled on my jacket and I stepped carefully around the passengers asleep on the deck and in hammocks slung between the deck poles, and made my way to the rail. A dugout was tied alongside, slapping the hull, and two fishermen were quietly dealing with the captain for the huge catfish spilling out of their canoe. The river and the wind and the voices and the gentle thump of boat against boat was a harmonious murmur, and I stayed at the rail to watch the dawn. Clouds in the east, so like fish scales that weathermen call it a mackerel sky, begin to color with the sun, deepest red changing maroon to salmon to pink to gold. While the sky upriver in the west was still deep enough to be starred, the light began to catch the whitecaps pushed up by the wind, and they glowed phosphorescent in the dark expanse of the river. Just below the spit of land where we had tied up during the night, a tributary that would have been a mighty river anywhere else in the world joined the Amazon. As the sky lightened, the two rivers were easily distinguished, for the Amazon is turbid muck and the branch is clear tea. They flow side by side out of sight without commingling, reflecting the colors of the dawn sky differently A school of dolphins races by, leaping downriver, their glistening backs appearing and disappearing, leaving wakes and foam a-dazzle in the dawn light. It's green, gold, silver, even oily black. When the sun clears the horizon, we're on the river again and chugging toward Manaus. I stay at the rail and breakfast is called. Tasteless manioc meal and bland white fish, the same as every breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but it is included in the fare, and there are no convenience stores selling Twinkies. I eat. In the morning, my friends and I, 2 Australians and Rick from the Peace Corps, move to the stern and hang our feet over the water. We smoke an occasional marijuana cigarette and chat and watch the river. Its true breadth can't often be discerned because huge channel islands in the course we follow are never less, but the course that we follow is never less than a half a mile across. The near bank is a wall of green that fills about 5 degrees of the horizon, and the far shore is just a dark, thin line. The jungle is not broken by bluffs or backed by distant mountains or sprayed with colorful flowers or enlivened with calling birds and rustling beasts. It's just a green wall. Everything else is river and sky, always the same and never boring. The water is so thick with sediments and moves so fast that the surface is constantly seen to twist and roil like a living floor. There's masses of white hyacinth and single plants with white and purple flowers float by, as do sticks and logs and whole trees. Sometimes a solitary white heron will wing up or down river, skirting the bank. Rarely a house on stilts or a canoe or a huge ocean-going ship discloses man. The sky's huge, from horizon to horizon, nowhere diminished by hills or buildings or waves. And there's always a storm building somewhere in the vast expanse, happening and dissipating. Some thunderheads reach tremendous heights, towering 50,000 feet, fierce and flashing lightnings. On this day, a storm begins to stalk us in the early afternoon, building over the river behind us, following and closing in on us for hours until it finally engulfs us. Visibility drops to a few feet in the rain and wind. The river turns to chaotic waves as big as the boat. The lightning is so near and often that thunder is the only sound that can be heard. The captain ties up and we wait for the fury to abate before putting out on the river again when the storm passes over completely and precedes us downriver. The setting sun decorates it with rainbows, more than one, as pieces of the thunderhead break off at high altitude and reflect the dying sun in greens and reds and yellows and purples until the last heart's blood red fades into night. Stars shine and shimmer in the unsmogged and new-washed atmosphere, and no town lights on shore or running lights on the boat belittle the brilliance of the waves. There are stars, stars, stars. Red, blue, white, the Southern Cross, the Big Dipper, the Magellanic Cloud, and the planets and the moon. The sky's ablaze, yet all is inky darkness on the river, and it's dangerous to travel in such obscurity. But, as on most days, we've fallen behind schedule, and so we continue. And a crew member stands at the prow, sweeping the beam of a flashlight into the devouring night, the light consumed within a few feet. Laughing at this truly dark humor, I climb into my sleeping bag on the dirty, crowded hard deck and fall to peaceful sleep. I awaken when we hit something, loud and jarring, as happens almost every night we travel in the dark. My heart is slamming as everyone comes restlessly alert. We wait to see if we are whole and must swim the dark river for life, but nothing happens. And soon the motors drone and the river's wash make all serene. Through it all, unhappy. I had already abandoned life and now relish being fearless of death and sleep until dawn. On the 6th day, we reach Manaus. I haven't traveled much in space for 20 years, but settled in southeast Fresno, I still travel in reality. 2 months ago in October, I was in a town similar to Fresno, but 100 miles northwest along the axis of the Great Valley, training with workmates and another 30 adjudicators from around the valley. We were all inside mourning, and when lunch break came, I bolted away for the peace and the fall weather and to see the town. I made a big loop, trusting my sense of time to get me back for the afternoon session, and I was strolling in comfortable oblivion when a violent tirade of threats and obscenities brought my feet and my mind to a halt. Catty corner, across an intersection, a man was shouting at the driver of a San Joaquin Valley pseudo-cowboy pickup. The truck sits on huge springs above huge wheels with a roll bar and a gun rack, and the driver's wearing a white Stetson hat. The driver's leaning further and further away from the window as a man stands on the street screaming and leaning further and further in. My first thought was it was like a B-movie cliche, a crazy outlaw bracing a wannabe tenderfoot. Only the guy in the street was not a cowboy, but a California construction laborer, bare, deeply tanned torso with a tattoo above his dirty Levi's and his hair in a greasy pigtail. Apparently, the pickup had run a stop sign and nearly broadsided the passenger side of the old sedan pulled up behind the pickup, and it had enraged the man in the street beyond reason. He was repeating in the vilest language that the woman and the child in the car could have been killed, and for driving away, the pickup driver was a jerk. And he glowed with an orangey greenish aura that said to me he was hopped up on a powerful drug. What riveted my attention like the center of a compelling mandala was the hunting knife sheathed at the small of his back. The cowboy couldn't see the knife, though, and so instead of driving away, he sat in the stream of abuse held by his pride. People were coming out of shops and stopping cars to stare, and I thought to myself, there's going to be a murder. My feet started into the street towards him, and it made me happy that my feet committed the rest of my body without my conscious will. I called out, "Hey, you can't do that, not in front of the woman and child." He turned. I stopped. He shouted, "You want a piece of me? You want a piece of me?" I dropped my hands, palms open towards him, 6 inches from my hips. "No, I don't want no part of you, but this is not the example set for the child's sake." I took a step back, and he took a step towards me, shouting, "You want this? You want part of me?" I was enjoying myself, moving him with my body like a torero capes a bull, thinking I was practicing Aikido, the martial art of the gentle way. I stepped back again. "No, I want no part of you. I want the pickup to drive away and you to go back to your family." The play cowboy, who had been staring at the big knife since the madman had turned towards me, did a double take and then sped away. And the madman swung his head after the pickup and then turned back to me. You want me?" Dropping my hands all the way to my side, I said, "No, I don't." And I stepped backwards to the curb. He stood for a bewildered second, then went to the car. I didn't leave the curb until he drove off. A reality trip can happen anytime, anywhere, and I want to close with a poem that Wallace Stevens, who explored the relationship between reality and words almost all his life, wrote when he was old and near death. It's one of the last poems he wrote. It's called Of Mere Being. The palm at the end of the mind rises beyond the last thought in the bronze decor. A gold-feathered bird sings in the palm without human meaning, without human feeling, a foreign song. You know then that it is not the reason that makes us happy or unhappy. The bird sings, its feathers shine, the palm stands on the edge of space, the wind moves slowly in the branches, the bird's fire-fangled feathers dangle down. If the palm at the end of the mind doesn't make me happy, what does? There are many ways of sensing it, and to illustrate, I'll draw your attention back to the opening Zen story. It has another dimension if you imagine a naked old Japanese sticking his skinny butt out the door as the thin leaves, saying, "Enjoy this moon." I leave you with the full moon and my wish for peace and love. Eric.